Hi, everyone, and welcome to Discover Engineering's Chats with Changemakers. I'm your host, Kavya, and I'm a high school senior from New Jersey. And each month, I welcome a different guest from the engineering community. Today is one of my favorite days of the year. It's Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day. And I'm excited to participate in this special episode as part of Discovery's Engineers Week celebration. I will be chatting with Peyton Gibson, a civil engineer and urban economist with a featured role in the brand new IMAX film, Cities of the Future. Peyton is also a member of the American Society of Civil Engineers. Peyton, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kavya. This is really awesome to be here on Engineering Weekend and on Girls' Day. Really cool. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to be asking Peyton a few questions to get to know a little bit more about her. And you can ask questions too by typing them in the Q&A box below, and we will save some time in the end to answer as many as we can. Okay, so let's get started. Peyton, can you please provide an overview of Autodesk and your role in that company?
Yeah, so right now I'm a senior business consultant with Autodesk. For those unfamiliar, Autodesk is a make and design software slash platform that engineers of all types, so civil engineers, mechanical engineers, industrial engineers, all sorts of engineers use our software to design and make the world you see around us. So my background as a civil engineer, and when I was a civil engineer first in my career, I was using it to design things like roads and parking lots and building layouts. But people also use our softwares to create 3D renderings of buildings. Mechanical engineers use it to design cars and planes. And we also have a media entertainment sector of our business where folks can use our platform to design special effects in movies that you have probably seen on the big screen before.
That's awesome to hear how the company's involved in so many different sectors and just working with different kinds of engineers. So I was just wondering, what does a typical day of work look like?
Yeah, so in my role, since my background is more on the architecture, engineering, and construction
Mhm.
realm, I work with a lot of the big civil engineering firms that are global, worldwide, and they're trying to kind of make their digital engineering and software more efficient, so that they can, build better buildings, more sustainable buildings. We can help them do carbon calculations in our software. So a lot of my role is working with these engineers across the world, looking at the kind of projects they're doing, if it's roads projects or construction projects on a big skyscraper. How can we make sure that they're using their software in a way that the building or the road is going to get built in the most sustainable and efficient way?
That's interesting to hear how sustainability is an important part of your work. And so since you started off with an engineering background and now you're pursuing a master's in spatial economics in Amsterdam, I was wondering like what inspired that path and what has been the most rewarding aspect of that experience so far?
Yeah, so it's been kind of a lot of turns in my career and interests in the past few years, but um, so yeah, I got a bachelor's in civil engineering, and then I worked within the civil engineering field for about 2.5 years,
Mhm.
doing all sorts of design and kind of typical civil engineering work. I was involved in the American Society of Civil Engineers. They have a policy division, so like infrastructure policy. Every 4 years, the American Society of Civil Engineers puts out this report card where they grade the US's infrastructure. So I was actually involved on a state level within my home state of Colorado. I was the chair of the Colorado Infrastructure Report Card. So I got really interested in policy and how kind of the built environment can affect, how we get to and from places, how it can affect economic development and well-being and sustainability. So kind of that intersection of civil engineering and public policy. And that's kind of what I think spatial economics was or is. So I was able to study kind of how these small changes in our built environments, so just changes in maybe like a road pathway or building different kinds of buildings in different places, how that can affect how we live our everyday lives. So that's was kind of the transition from engineering to economics for me.
And when working on these policy reports, what was probably the most surprising piece of knowledge that you might have learned about or observed?
Ooh, that's a good question. After I did the ASCE report card, I was
Mhm.
able to kind of use that experience. It was more of a volunteer experience to get a job in Washington, D.C., where I worked for the National Academies of Sciences. And there I was really working with a lot of economists and engineers on engineering and public policy. And one of my projects with them was on energy efficiency of kind of like your household appliances that you just use every day, like washing machine and dishwasher. And we were helping the Department of Energy look at how they can set the standards for, how much energy these appliances use so that we can have more sustainable like home lives. And it was just really interesting learning about, you never really think about like how much, I mean, you do now because of they have these smart dials and stuff that you can see the energy
Mhm.
coming through to your house, but you never really think of like these little things that like make your dishwasher more efficient, like how many plates you can put in there to make it the most efficient and things like that. So it's always the little details that kind of surprise me the most.
That's awesome, especially to hear how engineering and policy really intersect and they can impact lives across the country. So that's pretty cool. And what has been the most challenging project that you've worked on, and why was it challenging?
Ooh, I think so. It thinking back to my time in DC as well, I started my job just a month before COVID, so we were still kind of trying
Mm.
to figure out this whole Zoom thing. Especially, yeah, I was working with a lot of like very seasoned people who weren't super like well versed with technology, so kind of getting them online. But we were working on this big project on um, community resilience. So how can FEMA, so the Federal Emergency Management Administration in the US, how can they help different communities around the US become more resilient to climate change? Which is a huge topic within itself, right? So we had this huge thing we needed to get done in like 6 months. Everyone's remote, everyone's, some people were like in different countries. And we need to get like a good view on how, the FEMA can best support these communities around the US. So we had to think on all different scales. So on a city level, what does that mean? On a town level, if you live in a big city, if you live in the countryside, if you live in California versus if you live on the East Coast, even those cultural differences are pretty big. So bringing everyone together, getting everyone's perspective to kind of inform this policy and then doing it all online in the middle of the pandemic. I think it was really rewarding at the end because it all came together, but it was a lot of moving pieces for sure.
And I'm seeing like something you mentioned before also, like just having that attention to details. I think that's an important part of your job. So it's pretty interesting to hear how you have to think at all levels, all scales, especially when you're working with these large organizations like FEMA and the US Department of Energy. So it's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, in what ways do you think your job encourages you to be a change maker?
I think currently at Autodesk, since I took a step into the digital and tech world, we're using technology more and more every day, especially in the civil engineering world, to be the place where we get our data. So we're using it not only just to design a new building in an empty space, but we're using it to design a building in a virtual space where we can represent the rest of the real world, right? So I think, being in this digital space right now, I think in the future, this is going to help me become a change maker by leveraging these new changes in technology, because I think policy is always a few years behind technology. So if we can kind of marry the two right now and see what the abilities are in the technology, you can kind of help catch policy up with it. So that's why I wanted to kind of step into the technology space.
And that actually perfectly leads to our next segment. So, it's very cool that you're featured in the brand new IMAX movie, Cities of the Future. And before you tell us about that experience of reimagining future cities, we want to show the trailer for the film. And to our audience, as you'll see, Discovery's Future City program for middle and high school students will also be featured. So let's check it out.
Our world is defined by our cities. But as our climate changes and our population grows, we must adapt to meet new challenges. The creators of Dream Big invite you on a journey into the future, where today's engineers are designing solutions that will change the way we live forever. From electric flying air taxis and greener buildings to solar energy beamed down from space that will power entire cities. Welcome to the future. Discover a new vision of hope for the world and see the next generation as our greatest opportunity. Follow a team of middle school students as they compete in the Future City competition, where they build their own future city. Find out what it's like to be on a Future City team as they learn from engineer mentors, build their models, practice their presentations, and participate in the finals in Washington, D.C. Students learn firsthand what it's like to be an engineer, how to fight climate change, and build a sustainable city. Our kids have the power to change the world. Cities of the Future. A film for IMAX and giant screen theaters.
So I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty excited after seeing that trailer. And I think it's great to see the students work in the Future City competition and how demands for sustainability are actually encouraging us to design cities with more efficiency and creativity. So now we will ask Peyton about her experience being a part of that film. And so my first question is, can you please tell us what it was like filming for that movie?
Yeah, so I've done a decent amount of public speaking, I think, for an engineer. So I felt like I was like, oh yeah, I can do this. This would be really cool. But the movie industry is like nothing like the rest of my career. I remember when I was a young girl, I wanted to be an actress. But I think if I had gone through this, I think I would have stuck with being an engineer. It was so much fun. I mean, I got to see parts of, I've lived in Amsterdam for almost 3 years now, and I feel like with the crew I got to see parts of the Netherlands and Amsterdam that I would have never seen before. But and I got to hang out with Paul, who's the main star of the film, who I was friends with before, but it was awesome to spend the week with him. But yeah, it's very strange being like hooked up to a mic for like the whole week. You know, there's somebody listening to what you're saying the whole time, and it's crazy how much you have to redo shots just for like, you'll just see me and Paul just walking, but it took, yeah, maybe like 10 times just to get a clip of us walking, because the light has to be just right and we have to be walking kind of the certain way. I think there's a clip, I don't know if it ended up making it into the film, but we're on these really cool swings here in Amsterdam on top of this skyscraper where you can see this really awesome view of the whole city. And it was so much fun the first time. And then you kind of have to go up onto the swing like 15 times. And I started getting a little motion sick, but it was a really cool experience. And if I could do it over again, I would.
And we have our first audience question from Miss Derlis's STEAM class from Camas, Washington, and they wanted to know, how did you get into the new movie?
I think it was a lot of luck. So, like I said, I was friends with Paul Lee before. We've kind of crossed paths. I think a lot of it had to do with my involvement with the American Society of Civil Engineers. So like I said, I was pretty involved with the policy side, the report card, but I was also a leader from my time at university. I was president of my club there, and I was president of my local young members chapter. So I knew quite a few people within the American Society of Civil Engineers. And then, yeah, they wanted to film here in Amsterdam, and Paul said, "Hey, I have a friend in Amsterdam who can help with that." So a little bit of luck and a little bit of knowing the right people from being involved in the industry.
And what is one of your favorite parts of the movie?
Mm, it just makes me so happy to see Paul, like even just watching the preview, to see him interacting with the kids. Yeah, like Paul's just great, and seeing him so happy being able to work with the kids with Future Cities was a really cool experience.
And it's awesome that it features students from the Discovery's Future City competition. And I've understood that you volunteered as a judge for that competition. So could you please tell us more about that experience and just meeting with the kids and helping them turn their ideas into reality?
So I've worked as a judge for the Future City competition before, so I haven't been a mentor yet, but I would love to do that, especially if I end up stateside again one day. So I've judged in person once, and then I've judged online a few years, where I've looked at the presentations and the essays, but judging in person was really cool. I mean, I remember
Mhm.
thinking, oh my gosh, when I was this age, I would never have been able to put together these awesome ideas. I think that, yeah, the kids, they think of things that adults just can't even imagine, because we're so set in our ways. We think we know what the right way to design things is, and they would just come up with such cool ideas. I remember, like, I was like, yeah, I don't want to score anyone lower than like the highest, because everyone was doing so awesome.
And this is one of my favorite questions. So I'm curious, what do you think a city of the future might look like? How much time do you think it will take for that future to become reality?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think that a future city doesn't have to be as futuristic as we kind of, we think like flying cars, like everything's
Hmm.
super shiny and chrome. But to me, a future city is just a place where everyone feels welcome to live and has a space to live. So that's why I love Amsterdam a lot. You can get places very easily. There's really accessible public transit. A lot of our public spaces feel open to like people of all different backgrounds, of economic class and race, and just cities that just feel open to everyone, and that have accessible jobs and transit and just places to live. So for me, that's the most important thing of a future city. Not food. I mean, flying cars are definitely, that would be cool, but
Yeah, just being more inclusive. And now I want to dive more into your educational journey and how you got started. So, what drew you to the field of civil engineering, and how did your K to 12 and college experiences influence your path to become a civil engineer?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I grew up in an army family. So my family moved a lot when I was a kid. I think we moved like 10 or 11 times by the time I was 18. So I got to see a lot of the US. In my childhood, we would drive across the country just to move. One time we drove from Georgia to Arizona, Arizona to North Carolina. So I got to see a lot of the US and see kind of all the different types of built environments we had, whether it was like on an army base, living kind of like kind of in a secluded place within these big suburbs. And sometimes I got to see these big cities. I got to see like the Hoover Dam at a young age, and all these different national parks, which is more natural than built environment. But yeah, so I got to see a lot of roads during all these road trips, of course, too. So I think I started taking a pretty big interest in, when I lived in each of these places, how the city was built around me affecting how people were living, I think was the main thing. Yeah, and I think like a lot of people that end up in engineering, I took a liking to math and physics and figured I was pretty good at it, and thought engineering could be a good career path. But I did want to kind of combine anthropology and engineering when I was younger, and I still kind of wish that that was still a thing. I think in universities now, there's more of an emphasis on kind of having both that like more liberal arts, softer kind of education with the engineering, the harder stuff. So I think that would have been really cool because that's kind of what I see the economics piece as. But yeah.
And we have another audience question from Memphis Shelby County Schools. And so they wanted to know, how long would you have to be in school to become a civil engineer?
So I don't know if this has changed. Hopefully it hasn't since I was in school. So I got my bachelor's degree in 3.5 years, actually. So I took some summer classes. So I went to the Colorado School of Mines. Yeah, and I finished in 3.5 years. Usually I think it takes about 4 to get a bachelor's in engineering. But I think there are different paths you can take for like associate's degrees as well.
Hmm. Okay. And do you have any mentors who inspired you to pursue the path that you are on today?
Yeah, I think it's super important when you go through high school and also through university. Um, I'm still very, very close with my advisor, my undergraduate advisor in
Hmm.
university. And he wasn't like my technical advisor, but just like in terms of career paths, he would always help me when I was picking out internships and kind of guiding me in the way that I wanted to go. And I still keep up with him on email today, like 8 years later. And he's like a really good friend and still like a true mentor to me.
And what would you tell kids who aren't so sure about engineering or who may think that they're not cut out to pursue the field?
I think engineering, if I think there's so much you can do with an engineering degree. Like if you kind of look at my resume and background, even if you think, I don't want to do design, there's still like just for civil engineering, there's construction. I think, what it means to be an engineer today is a lot different than what it meant to be 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. Um, and yeah, the first year is pretty tough. I won't lie. You have to do a lot of math, you have to do a lot of physics. It can be really fun. It's the foundation of your degree, but once you get into it, I knew I like civil engineering was going to be really cool. So you get into these cooler major specific courses, and if you really like those, they're really fun, and you're usually surrounded by a bunch of nerds who are passionate about what they're learning, which always helps.
That's great to hear. And this week we are celebrating Engineers Week, and as today is Girl Day, we are shining a spotlight on more girls in engineering. So, what empowerment advice would you give girls who have hopes and dreams of a future in STEM?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to kind of go for it. I had a dad who
Mhm.
was really encouraging to me in terms of not making sure that I wavered in terms of going for STEM because I mean, I think when I went into my bachelor's degree a few years ago, there weren't a lot of women at my college. But today that's grown. I think the number of women at my undergraduate university has grown by quite a lot. So yeah, I mean, I've had a great career so far, and yeah, I think you just kind of got to go for it.
Definitely. And can you tell us about a time that you may have had a challenge or failed at something and what you learned from that personal experience?
Ooh, within work or
I can leave it open-ended, yeah.
um yeah, so I think my current position is the first one where it's a lot more business facing. Before I'd worked for the government and I had worked in policy, so it was a lot more like government and policy oriented. So this is my first position where I've kind of had to take a business lens, where you're talking to kind of like, customers that are paying for your software. So I've had to learn quite a bit on how to navigate those relationships with
Hmm.
customers. So I think in the past few months, it's just been kind of learning where you draw the line between what is the business relationship here and what is the like personal relationship. Whereas in government and policy, things are a little bit more black and white. So kind of making that switch and making a few mistakes in terms
Yeah.
of what I can and can't say has been a learning experience.
And we have another audience question, and they wanted to know, what made you interested in becoming an engineer? I think you may have partially answered this before, but how did you decide that this pathway was for you? And how did you keep that passion for engineering still strong?
Hmm. Yeah, I remember my internships during university helped a lot as well in terms
Mhm.
of like I remember the first time I got to put on like a hard hat and walk out into the field and how excited I was to do that. I think even in high school, I had an interest in engineering and I had some really good mentors and stuff who took me to some different labs around my area to we looked at like mechanical engineering and I was like, I don't know if that one's the right fit. But once I got onto a construction site, I remember being like, yeah, this is the kind of industry that I want to be in. So trying things out,
Definitely.
reaching out to people, looking into things.
And I think what I've noticed so far is that even in your engineering side, like back when that was more taking part more of your role, you still had to like work with a lot of people, connect with them. So I think those soft skills are definitely underrated. And I
Mm.
feel from what I'm hearing from you that they're important to kind of finding a strong footing in your career. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
yeah.
And now we're going to move on to some personal or fun questions. So what do you like to do for fun outside of your work?
Um, I do a variety of things right now. So in the last 2 years, I got into triathlon. I was a runner before, so I picked up cycling and swimming. Swimming is very hard to learn. So if there's any swimmers on here, I commend you. And then I also really like to write. So like just like personal essays and nonfiction. And I think that really helps with like communicating in general, like with your friends and family, but also like in the workplace. I think it can kind of like flow into there as well and to being like more vulnerable and just being able to communicate how you feel. So those have been my two big things right now have been, yeah, triathlon and writing.
And what is a skill that you haven't mastered quite yet, but would like to?
I would say writing because I don't think you can ever really master it. And I don't think I'll ever master this, but my one New Year's resolution was to learn how to bake. So this year I've done a banana cream pie, a strawberry cake, and some cookies. So working through that right now. It's hard.
As hard as engineering, or
I mean, getting a cake consistency right is really something that I would be proud of to do.
and we'll wrap up with one more question. So this year's Engineers Week theme is Welcome to the Future. What does that mean for you?
Hmm. I think I'm gonna go back to my last answer, which is about cities of the future in general, which is just yeah, having more inclusive spaces where people of all backgrounds feel welcome and kind of going back towards sustainability as well. So um, sustainable, inclusive, equitable, kind of those buzzwords that we hear a lot, but I still hold on dear to them.
And I believe that's all the questions we have time for today. So thank you so much, Peyton, for joining us. It's great to have you here, especially for Engineers Week. And I think from your path in education and your engineering journey, it's clear that there are so many possibilities and ways to create that sustainable and inclusive future, whether it's on the business side, the engineering side, or the policy side. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you
And
guys for having me.
and we also want to thank ASCE for partnering with us today and our chat sponsors, which include the United Engineering Foundation, Bechtel, NCWES, and TE Connectivity. And a huge thanks to all of you for tuning in. To learn more about civil engineering, you can check out the Discover Engineering's website at discovery.org and click on the Engineering Careers tab. And also, we would love to hear what you think of Chats with Changemakers and your feedback around that. So if you're watching live on Zoom, you will be directed to our survey right after the webinar, and everyone else can access the survey URL and QR code, which will be displayed soon. And be sure to join our next Chats with Changemakers. Tune in on Thursday, March 21st at 1 p.m. Eastern to meet Denise Skiadopoulos. And Denise is a mechanical designer at Argonne National Laboratory. So see you next time. Thank you.